worship 60x, New Testament. There's other instances where the specific word worship isn't used, but it's clearly worship that's being ascribed to Jesus. So in the book of Revelation, for example, at the bottom, page 3 and 4 there, we have similar stuff used for the worship of the Son and of the worship of the Father in the book of Revelation. Oh, by the way, the modalists, the UPC, the United Pentecostals, say Son of God is only a reference to Jesus' human nature. So they say that if you're United Pentecostal, you say the Son of God did not exist before the Incarnation. And Jesus is only the Son because he became human. So they'll say that the Father is the divine nature of Jesus, and they'll say that the Son is the human nature, which is not true. You can see that in Matthew 14:33, for example. Jesus is worshipped specifically because he's the Son of God. So Matthew 14:33 is showing that Son of God is a term for deity. It's not a term for an impersonal human nature. It's a term for Christ as God. As God, he was worshipped specifically because he was the Son of God. And they weren't worshiping him because he had human nature. Anyway, back to the book of Revelation here. So the worship of the Father is seen in Revelation. It says in Revelation 7, 11, 11, 16, 54, and 54. It says, all the angels stood around about the throne and about the elders and the four beasts, and fell down before the throne on their faces and worshiped God. So here they worship God in this picture of the eternal state. Oh, well, this is actually heaven. And as believers fall down before him that sat on the throne and worship him that liveth forever and ever, and cast their crowns before the throne, saying, Thou art worthy, O Lord, to receive glory and honor and power. So they fall down before the Father, and they ascribe glory and honor and power to him. Now they do the same thing, though, to the Lamb in Revelation. So in chapter 5, it says, In the midst of the throne and the four beasts, in the midst of the elders, was a lamb as it had been slain. And that's Jesus Christ. The elders, who represent believers in the book of Revelation, fell down before the Lamb, having every one of them harps and golden vials full of odors, which are the prayers of saints. So here they prayed to Jesus. Prayer and worship were offered to Jesus. If Jesus isn't God, you shouldn't pray to him. But here prayers are offered to Jesus. And they sung a new song, saying, Thou art worthy to take the book, and to open the seals thereof. For thou wast slain, and hast redeemed us to God by thy blood, of every kindred and tongue and people and nation. And hast made us unto our God kings and priests, and we shall reign on the earth. And I beheld, and I heard the voice of many angels round about the throne, and the beasts and the elders, and the number of them was 10,000 times 10,000, 1,000 times, saying with a loud voice, Worthy is the Lamb that was slain, to receive power and riches and wisdom and strength and honor and glory and blessing. And every creature which is in heaven, and on the earth, and under the earth, and such as are in the sea, and all that in them, for I saying, Blessing and honor and glory and power be unto him that sitteth upon the throne, and unto the Lamb, forever and ever. And on the four we said amen. So, here the Father and the Son, I don't know if they were doing it between the hand and the side or not, but the Father and the Son are both equally ascribed blessing and honor and glory and power, which would be the grossest idolatry if Jesus was not God. So they fall down and worship the Father and the Son very plainly. Even apart from the word worship, they're falling down and worshiping the Son in the book of Revelation. And interestingly enough, even the word fall down or prostrate oneself before is always connected to worship in Revelation, but only the Father and the Son are ascribed worship in that book. In the whole New Testament, godly people only fall down before Jesus Christ. So now, you could say fall down isn't necessarily a term of deity, but in the Bible, godly people only fall down before God. But Jesus, they regularly fall down before him. I like to see a JW fall down before Jesus and worship him like that. You know what I mean? I don't think it's going to happen. But godly people do that to Jesus. Also, that term where it says that they offer the prayers of the saints there in Revelation 5, we read that at the top of page 4, they're offering the prayers of the saints to Christ. That would show that the Son is a fit object of prayer. And he's the recipient of this incense from the altar of incense, which was offered to God in the Old Testament. That's explained at the bottom of footnote 6 there. And if you're the recipient of worship, can a creature hear and answer prayer?
No.
Why? Why can't a creature hear and answer prayer? Let's say you... Oh, that's Mary, okay? Who's Mary? Do people pray to Mary? They do. They pray to Mary, okay? Pray to Mary. All right, pray to Mary. Pray to Mary. Okay. Well, don't pray to Mary. But let's say you do. Why shouldn't you pray to Mary?
She's not deity.
She's not God. So the Bible actually teaches you should only pray to God. So this is wrong because, one, you only pray to God because God said so. Many texts say you should only pray to God. Okay? That's one very, very good reason. Only pray to God. Yeah. Now, and there's a lot of texts that prove that. Usually people don't dispute you should. Like a JW type is not going to dispute you should only pray to God. Let's say, though, Mary actually wanted to hear what you had to say. Does Mary want to hear you pray to her? No, she doesn't want to. Okay. Let's say she did, though. Okay. Let's say there are all over the world at any given point in time 100 million people. That's 100. 1 million. Let's say at any given time there are 100 million people praying to Mary. Okay, at any given moment, because of all the Catholics in the world. If they're probably more than that. They're saying they're religion or something. If you had 100 million people speaking to you at one time, how many would you be able to understand? None or one. Maybe one. You might be able to understand one of them. What would the rest of them would get a busy signal, eh? So you might be able to understand one, maybe. And then the 99%. The 99% get a busy signal, okay? So even if Mary wanted to listen to you, your chance of getting through would be really small. Because she's a human being. She's not God. She can't hear you. Okay? She can't understand everybody at once because she's not... To be able to answer 100 million people at one time, what characteristics of deity do you need to have?
Omniscience.
Omniscience. You need to have omniscience to be able to do this. So the ability to answer all kinds of people at once requires omniscience. So the fact that Jesus Christ is prayed to both shows that he's God, because you should only pray to God, and it shows that he's omniscient. He can actually hear you. He can answer all those 100 million people at the same time, or however many more there are. All right? Mary can't. She's a nice lady. She can't answer your prayer. Also, if you're praying to somebody, he has to have the power to answer it too. Mary can't actually... So omnipotence is also very helpful if you're going to pray to somebody. Because he has to actually be able to do what you're asking. Like, you might be able to ask, you might ask me if you were in debt, $100 million to take care of your debt. I can't do it, I don't have money. I'm a security guard, I can't do that. Right? So I can't answer that, I don't have the power to do it. You might ask me to get your friend out of prison in Afghanistan, like go in there and like throw some grenades and get him out. I can't do it. I don't have the ability, I'm not strong enough. So the fact that you get prayed to also requires omnipotence. If you're the one who, you actually have the ability to answer. Jesus Christ is omnipotent, he's omniscient, that's why he can be prayed to, and that's why he is worthy of prayer. So the fact that he's prayed to requires his deity. And this isn't just Revelation how he's prayed to. 1 Corinthians 1:2, for example, Jesus is prayed to. It says saints are people who call on Jesus Christ. So that's another evidence for the worship of Christ. Christ is the object of worship. He's the object of prayer in the New Testament. And so that's what we see in the Bible. Jesus Christ is worshipped all over the place in the Bible. And once you admit that, you really, the Trinity is going to come. You can't really ascribe worship to Christ without Trinitarian implications of that. So let's see then what the earliest post-Christian writers did. Did they also worship Jesus? Well, if you look on page 5, the earliest patristic writers also ascribed worship, proskuneo, to the true God, and they said no one else should get worship besides Jehovah. And there's a bunch of references there, 2 Clement, Martyrdom, Polycarp, Athenagoras, and so on in footnote 9. And as we mentioned, even apart from the specific word worship, Jesus gets worship in other ways, like in the Revelation text. So it's not, the argument from the word proskuneo is strong, but the argument's not just proskuneo. Jesus gets worship with other terms also, like in Revelation 5, where he's ascribed equal honor and glory to the Father. So God receives worship, according to the earliest patristic writers, while kings and rulers get honor, but not worship. So they think you can honor them, you can honor kings and so on, but you don't worship the king. You only give worship to Jehovah. So for example, Theophilus of Antioch said here, "Therefore I will rather honor the king, not indeed worshiping him, but praying for him. But God, the living and true God, I worship, knowing that the king is made by him." You will say then to me, "Why do you not worship the king?" Because he is not made to be worshipped, but to be reverenced with lawful honor. For he is not a god, but a man appointed by God, not to be worshipped, but to judge justly. So they said, you only worship God, don't worship the king, and stuff like that. So did they also say that Jesus gets worshipped? Well, they sure did. So here, again, Polycarp, Martyrdom of Polycarp, 17:2-3. "We will never be able either to abandon the Christ who suffered for the salvation of the whole world of those who are saved, the blameless on behalf of sinners, or to worship anyone else. For this one who is the Son of God we worship, but the martyrs we love as disciples and imitators of the Lord, as they deserve on account of their matchless devotion to their own king and teacher. May we also become their partners and fellow disciples." So we love the martyrs, but we worship the Son of God. And only the Son of God we worship. Justin Martyr, on the next page, page 6, said the same thing. And of course, remember, Justin was a JW, according to JW. Right? So let's see what this JW said here. "Whence to God alone we render worship. Next to God we worship and love the Word, who is from the unbegotten and ineffable God, since also he became man for our sakes, that becoming a partaker of our sufferings, he might also bring us healing." So we worship the Son. Here he also said we worship the Father, Son, and Spirit. "We confess the Father of righteousness and temperance and the other virtues in both him and the Son, and the prophetic Spirit we worship and adore." So we worship the Father, the Son, and Spirit. We adore the Father, the Son, and Spirit, knowing that in reason and truth, and so on, from his apology. And here, Justin, in his dialogue of Tryphon, the next quote says, he quotes, "You shall worship the Lord your God, and him only shall you serve." At the time of Christ's birth, Magi came from Arabia, worshipped him, Jesus. Now this King Herod, at the time when the Magi appeared, came to him from Arabia, and said they knew from a star which appeared in the heavens that a king had been born in the country, and they had come to worship him. "Learn from the elders of your people that it was thus written regarding Bethlehem the prophet. And you, Bethlehem, the land of Judah, are by no means least among the princes of Judah, for out of you shall go forth a leader who shall feed my people." Accordingly, the Magi from Arabia came to Bethlehem and worshipped the child, and presented him with gifts, gold and frankincense and myrrh. But returned not to Herod, being warned in the revelation after worshipping the child in Bethlehem. As soon as the child was born, they came to worship him, for even at his birth he was possessed of his power. Accordingly, when a star rose in heaven at the time of his birth, this is recorded by the memoirs of the apostles, that's the New Testament, the Magi from Arabia, recognizing the sign by this, came and worshipped him. And that Christ, being the Lord, and God the Son of God, and appearing formally in the glory of fire as at the bush, let all the angels of God worship him. So the Magi worship Jesus. Jesus is God the Son. He was the one who was in the bush with Moses. So all the angels worship him. Jesus is the object of worship, according to the earliest Christian writings. So the earliest post-apostolic writings follow the New Testament practice of restricting worship to the true God. And they also worship Jesus as God, because they recognize the deity of Christ. Now, that was the view that was taken for centuries. If you look at footnote 17, the word proskuneo, that's proskuneo, became consecrated to the highest Christian worship. So for centuries after the composition of the New Testament, Christendom accepted that worship, that which is called in Latin latreia and Latin servitus, is due to God only. So they offered only worship to God. Now, in 787 AD, the developing Roman Catholic Church actually changed that. In the 700s, there was this thing called the iconoclastic controversy. You had some of the Roman Catholics and the Eastern Catholics that were against worshiping images, and then you had ones that were in favor of worshiping images. The iconoclasts said we should get rid of all the images, and the iconodules said we should worship the images. And the images were doing miracles and stuff, and that was showing that they were true. Okay? And in 787, against the ones who were against the worship of images, the Roman Catholic Church said you can give proskuneo to images. Proskuneo to images. That was 87 though. So it even took the Roman Catholic Church a long time to decide you should worship images. And then there was a big fight about it. But eventually they came around and started worshiping images. But in pre-Constantinian Christendom, in the true churches and in the New Testament, worship was given only to God, but Jesus and the Father and the Holy Spirit are worshipped. Another word for worship is mentioned on page 8 there, and that's latruo. Latreia. This is a word that's usually translated service in the New Testament, but this is also a word for worship. It's a service of worship. Just like we have a church service, and that means we're coming together to worship. This word is used in Matthew 4 where it says, "Thou shalt worship the Lord thy God, him only shalt thou serve." That word serve is this latruo, or the non-verbal form latreia. This is also specifically a service restricted to worship. It's like in Leviticus where they would have a divine, they would serve God, the priests would have service. That would be this the Greek word for translating the Hebrew word is this word here. And this is also restricted to worship of God. And now, latruo is used in the Greek Old Testament for the worship of the Messiah in Daniel 7:13-14. And if you look at on page 10, the very, very earliest Christian writings also ascribe this type of service worship to the Son of God. So Polycarp, writing in Philippians, around AD 110, on page 10 there, says, "Therefore prepare for action and serve God in fear and truth, leaving behind the empty, meaningless talk and the error of the crowd. And believing in him who raised our Lord Jesus Christ from the dead and gave him glory in his throne in his right hand, to whom all things in heaven and earth are subjected, whom every breathing creature serves," latruo, "who is coming as judge of the living and the dead, for whose blood God will hold responsible those who his name." So here every creature serves with this word for worship, Jesus Christ. Or in the dialogue with Trypho, Justin Martyr again says, all the families of the earth will serve or worship Jesus Christ. So Jesus Christ both gets proskuneo in the earliest Christian writings, and he gets latruo. So the conclusion on page 11 there is Jehovah says that he will not give his glory to another. Only Jehovah is worthy of worship. But the Son is worshipped like he is, the Father is. This is the practice of the New Testament and of earliest Christianity. In fact, John 5:32 says, "All men should honor the Son, even as they honor the Father." So you honor the Father and the Son the same way. Even as you honor the Father, so you honor the Son. And he that honoreth not the Son, honoreth not the Father which hath sent him. Why is that? Well, it's because Jesus is equal in nature to the Father. He is equally Jehovah to the Father, and the worship of Jesus by people, by the disciples, by the angels, shows that. So that's actually kind of a central thing in the New Testament, this worship of Jesus Christ. And the earliest Christians were worshiping Jesus. They were worshiping Jesus. Now, just like today, you can have somebody who has never read the Athanasian Creed, okay? And I think it's a good creed, but that's okay. You know what I mean? You can survive and not read the Athanasian Creed. But he recognizes Jesus as God because he ascribes worship to Jesus. he trusts in Jesus. He recognizes the equal authority of the Father, the Son, and Spirit. So we're not saying that in 100 AD they took out that big, gigantic creed that was developed only once the errors developed. And even before the errors that they had to made to write the creed developed, they had this giant creed. But the fundamentals of Trinitarianism were clearly present from the beginning. They were worshiping the Father, the Son, and the Spirit, which requires, really, the big giant creed is simply the New Testament evidence fleshed out in opposition to the attacks on it. You don't need to flesh it out until the errors actually develop, and you have to then deal with them. So you aren't, it's very unreasonable for an anti-Trinitarian to expect a Trinitarian to have something that deals with all the errors when the errors didn't even exist yet, which is really what they're saying. They're saying unless you find the Apostle John's body in his grave, and you find a copy of the Athanasian Creed, like right there in a scroll, they couldn't have believed in Trinity. Okay? But all this stuff that they're doing, this worship they're ascribing to the Son of God, shows that they are recognizing this doctrine, even though the errors that made it so you had to be very precise with all these different things hadn't yet developed. And so there was not as much, they didn't need to be as because it hadn't none of those attacks had yet arisen. Do you have any questions about this worship study?
Earlier we were talking about blessing and honor, glory and power.
Mm-hmm.
How do we ascribe power to God?
How do you ascribe power to... Well, it's not like you give him those things, but you're recognizing that he has all these characteristics. So you're recognizing that he is the blessed one, he's the glorious one, he's the honored one. So you're recognizing his power. It's not like you give him power, but you're ascribing, these are all characteristics that you have, and we're recognizing you, or we're falling before you, recognizing that you are these things. So that would be what it is.
The Bible says to bless the Lord,
Mm-hmm.
and then we honor God, we honor kings, and then we, what's the other one? We glorify Him, but we don't give power. I mean, we just...
when we glorify God, we do praise Him, but we're recognizing Him as the one who is worthy of all glory. He has all glory, so we glorify Him. So He has all power, so we recognize that. So I think that's the sense of that. Oh, I should mention this. Proskuneo is used if you go before the New Testament era and you go back a ways. It was used for less than worship of... Okay, if you're pagan Greeks, you worship your king, you worship, your ancestors maybe, you worship all these gods. So it's not surprising that you do find in pre-Christian Greek proskuneo used for other than worship of the one true God. Because they didn't even recognize that there was only one true God. Okay? So that is the case. Or even in the LXX it was used that way. But in the New Testament, out of the 60-some uses, it's only used for the worship of the true God. So, are we saying that proskuneo was never in the history of the Greek language used for anything less than the worship of the true God? No, we're not saying that. Are we saying that it was restricted that way in the New Testament and in subsequent writings? Yes, that is what we were saying. So that's, since we're not JWs, we don't want to, hide things and make stuff up. So we want to be, clear about what we're actually saying.
So are you saying that they would use it in reference to God?
Proskuneo?
Mm-hmm. Pre-Christian Greek?
Yeah, no, they would. I mean, you could have a pagan Greek and he would worship Zeus or worship, Athena, but he might also worship his dad. You know what I mean? So in pre-Christian Greek, and even actually in the Greek Old Testament, proskuneo is sometimes used for less than only worship of the true God. But words develop in meaning over time. Just like the word dumb. Dumb used to mean silent. But if you say to somebody, you're dumb, you're not telling him that he's not saying anything. You're saying that he's not very intelligent. Okay? And so, in the New Testament, and this isn't a word that only appears, 3 times in the New Testament. 60 times is a lot of uses. It appears 60 times, and every one of those 60 times, proskuneo is only worship of the true God. And this New Testament usage continues into the post-Anti-Christendom. So you don't have in the apostolic patristic writings, the earliest church fathers. I don't like calling them church fathers, just don't call them your fathers or your father. But the earliest post-Christian writings also restrict this verb proskuneo to worship of the true God. So we are saying that, and that's the case. But if you go back before, it was wider. And that's true. It does, but the argument is still very strong and still stands. Because in the New Testament it says you only worship Jehovah, Matthew 4:10. So by that time, the word had come to be used only for worship of the true God, at least by Christians. I mean, we even saw, in the pagans, he was arguing why you don't worship the king. So there were people who wanted to worship the king, because the pagans would do that. They would worship the king. But the Christians weren't worshiping the king. They were worshiping only Jehovah. But while they were worshiping only Jehovah, they were worshiping the Father, Son, and Spirit.
What does Greek Christendom refer to that? Are they saved? Or are you just talking about Greek?
Well, okay, some of these guys, when I use the term Christendom, I'm talking about everybody within what you would read about in the history of Christianity. So, are they all saved? No. In fact, as we start, that's kind of a good question. When we start to look, which will be next class, we start to look at the history of the development of the doctrine of the Trinity, the dissenting people don't have much on record. So we do have statements that the people who didn't join with Constantine, the dissenters, those guys, the Novatians, the Donatists, they were actually orthodox in Trinitarianism. So they believe the same things as the Roman Catholics on this. But when you try to look at, we're going to be looking at the development of the doctrine within what became, Catholicism, because there isn't really not much else in terms of the historical data. So no, Christendom is different than only true churches. So for example, some of these guys that I quoted, they were right on their doctrine of God, but that does not mean they were right in all their other doctrine. They could very well have been messed up. Clement of Rome was right, as far as I can tell. If you read Clement of Rome, he was supposed to be the third pope. He lived around 100 AD. He looks just like a Baptist. He used justification of faith alone, independence of each church. It's pretty interesting to read, but he was supposed to be the third pope. But some of these later guys, the later you get, the more messed up they are in a lot of things. So some of the good guys in the history of the doctrine of the Trinity might not have been that good in their some other things they believed. Well, actually, they weren't that good. Some of the things they believed. So, but we can be happy at least they got the doctrine of God right. Any other questions? That was a good question. Okay, well, with that as the background, we then we'll get into look at the history of development of the doctrine, and then we will get into the exegetical basis for it. Since the Trinity is properly considered in the context of worship, not just in the context of merely recognizing facts, I put up, what's the name of that song, "Oh Come Let Us Adore Him"? What's the actual title?
It's probably in the hymnal.
I'm sure it is, but whatever, you know that tune? What I have, this is a verse of that hymn that unfortunately they took it. On our hymnal they took it out. I have a hymnal at home. It's called Trinity Baptist Hymnal. It's a good hymnal. But they actually have this verse in there. And this is, I think, the best verse of the song. This is one of the verses from that song. "Oh come, let us adore Him." And so to close, let's go ahead and sing this verse. So God of God, light of light. Because I think this is an amazing truth. And this is like the Nicene Creed, actually. And He's very God begotten and created. So come, let us adore Him. So we'll sing that verse to close, because I think that's one of the best verses of that song. And it's getting close to. Jesus wasn't born. There's no evidence Jesus was born on December 25th, but we can be happy about Jesus being born every day of the year. But let's go ahead and sing it. God of God, light of light, lo, He abhors Very God begotten, not created. O come, let us adore.